This is the Mox Team Zirconia podcast, episode 22, Frontier Eldrazi Assault Formation. Welcome to Mox Team Zirconia. I'm Colin.
And I'm Graham, and we are your hosts. We are a podcast about Magic the Gathering for everyone.
We want to inspire you to try out your own brews and pick up an untested deck, like one of ours or one of yours that you've built. Try it out and change it to suit your needs.
That's right, and remember, our immediate goal is always and will always be to make the next deck better than the last one.
We don't claim to be professional brewers. We are definitely still learning how to make good decks, but we want to bring you with us as we get better and better.
Oh, so true, Colin. And reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at MoxZirconia. And please, please, please let us know what you think of the podcast.
And don't forget, we need your help to spread the word about the podcast. So tell your friends, anybody that you are playing with that you know listens to podcasts and you think would enjoy it. We would love it if you would mention us and help us out.
And word has been spreading. Thank you so very much. And also welcome to all of our new and first-time listeners.
And a reminder to our new and returning listeners, our episodes are up on YouTube, so please subscribe there. And also on tappedout.net is where we post our deck lists. So if you go there and search Mox Team Zirconia, you can see all of the cards that we're talking about throughout the episode. You can see the deck that we're brewing in the episode, and also past decks that we've brewed and links to past episodes where you can find more things we've done in the past and things we've learned since then.
And a few side projects and spin-off decks where a deck brew didn't go our way, and we decided we wanted to, have a go at it on our own.
That's right. And if you subscribe to us, I think it's called following on tappedout.net, it will let you know whenever we add a new deck to it, so you can check it out right away. And we love comments and suggestions, so please let us know what you think of the deck in the comments on tappedout.net.
That's true. We're terrible about hitting all the cards that should be in decks, and people frequently call us out on it, so, feel free to be that person.
Exactly. Okay, so now we are once again pleased to have a guest with us on the podcast this week. He is the creative director at Face to Face Games Toronto. He is the co-owner of MTGFrontier.com and founding member of Hike Club on manadeprived.com, which you should definitely check out. Please welcome Tony. Tony, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. That sounds rehearsed, but you've got practice, so thank you.
Yes, our show is fancy. We rehearse, and we prepare to make sure that our content is premium quality for our listeners.
Approved.
That's right. We've been preparing for at least 5 minutes.
Obviously, with Tony here, we are going to be talking about Frontier again this week because we got a lot of really good feedback about talking about Frontier in the past. I have now been to 2 official, unofficial Frontier events at my local game store and had a blast, and brought some brews and tried some things out, and I feel like I'm getting sort of the hang of how the format feels, and I'm pretty excited about that. And we just thought it'd be super fun. And also, Tony is just great. So I'm really glad you're here, Tony.
Me too. And we're going to have a good time in Vegas. So let's kick off the jams here.
That's right. So just a refresher that this podcast, Mox Team Zirconia, is primarily a standard podcast. However, we will be doing some Frontier format sporadically. And, whenever we can get Tony, pretty much. And then also, eventually, once we feel more comfortable in the format by ourselves, we might do some Frontier content by ourselves. But we will also make sure that we are still keeping up with the times with Standard, which is a format that we also really like, and making sure that we're staying up with the metagame and brewing decks. And so the mono white vehicles deck that we brewed last week, we will talk about the results of that next week on the podcast, and we'll just focus on Frontier today. Although early results are good, I think it's rolling.
That's right, and if you guys like our Frontier content, let us know. If you don't like it, let us know. Tell us what you guys think in the comments. Talk to us on Twitter. Send us emails. Comment on our tapped out. Let us know.
Yep. So we asked if people wanted more Frontier content, and enough people said yes. And I'm like, all right, let's book Tony again. Let's do it, because I have a great time talking about that too. So Tony, you are fully immersed in the Frontier Zone over there in Toronto, and you guys had a big event on Monday. How did it go? What happened? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, we hosted what we called our Sunday Showdown, only it was the Monday Showdown. So normally it's a weekly 1K event. I was pretty lucky to have that in the city. It's rotating formats, but I convinced Kelly, the owner of Face to Face Games Toronto, to have a double showdown on the holiday Monday. So it was a 2K event, which is a pretty big deal. The largest prize pool hosted in North America, hosted in the world that isn't Japan. So
hold on a second, Tony. If you're in Toronto, I know Monday was a holiday down in the States, but I kind of doubt you guys celebrate President's Day up there.
Ha, exactly. We call it Family Day.
Do you really?
Yes.
Tell us about Family Day.
Just kidding. It's called Hockey Day, and it's when everyone takes off the day to go to their local rink, and whether you have skates or not, you just go and play hockey with the local families.
Oh my God, that sounds way better than President's Day.
I don't believe either one of those exists. I think you're pulling our leg.
Nope, I'm looking it up.
They both sound fake.
Looking it up.
We'll play two lies and a truth, and I'll tell you one more thing, and you can guess what's true.
Okay.
Monday is specifically designed as a national holiday for families to play Magic at their local game store. That's why we call it Family Day.
All right, Graham, which is true? Which do you think is true? One of those is this is welcome to Wait, Don't Tell Me Mock Zirconia edition.
Oh, well,
So the options are Family Day specifically for Magic, Family Day because it's the actual name of the real holiday in Canada, or go to your Hockey Day.
It's got to be the Family Day one because, I mean, not everybody plays Magic, and even in the United States, we don't actually have an official holiday for football, so I can't imagine that Canadians actually have a holiday for hockey. That just seems too far-fetched.
Yep. Well, according to Google, which is always right, it is totally Family Day, and it's a public holiday, or Family and Community Day, and that's all it really says. So, cool.
Because that's all you need to know to take the day off or get paid time and a half.
That's right.
Well, that sounds pretty rad.
I think we just felt left out that we didn't have a holiday in February. It's actually quite recent. If you're looking it up, when was the origins of it? Like, it's a few years ago, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. 2007, it looks like.
Yeah, so 10 years. 10 years. So 10 years we've been having Family Day.
Well, February is kind of a dreary month if you don't have something like a big Frontier tournament to go to. So
honestly,
good.
So, well, tangent aside, the Frontier tournament was fantastic. 38 players, so very high EV for a 2K prize pool.
Yeah.
Yeah, very high, if you want to do the math there. First and second place was 400 each. As well as points for the Sunday, the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny patent pending that we're hosting, which is sort of like an upgraded in-house invitational where 50 points qualifies you for the tournament every 6 months, and first place for that tournament is a check for $2,000.
Wow.
That's a big check.
It's a big check. So all winners are qualified, and if you are the absolute points leader, you start with 2 buys, and if you're in the top 10, you also have a buy for the Ultimate Showdown. So it's a pretty big deal, and a lot of people have been really, really excited to take part in the tournament series. So humble brags, all that's good. But the most interesting thing actually to come out of the tournament yesterday is that no one was on a Tarka Red like I dictated they should be. With my top 8 list on Facebook. Fools. And then I myself built a deck to try and beat it and got horribly crushed by infinite control decks, then Abzan, then Hardened Scales. And the Hardened Scales decks were the most impressive decks I've seen in the format, not close. That's it.
Are they just like snake decks?
That makes sense. Because, I mean, think about all the counter antics that you have in the cons block, all the counter antics that you have in the recent Kaladesh blocks, not to mention some of the ones from the Zendikar block that's all in Frontier right now. There's so many counter antics right now. And I feel like in the standard metagame, they separated those from each other on purpose. But in Frontier, it's all fair play.
Yeah, and I'll make sure you guys have a link to our top 8 deck list, so you guys can share it and see what's going on. But just the ability to have 8 scales effects, and then just take the regular standard build, for example, because there's actually a few different flavors there at the tournament. Some even went so far as I have like Tireless Tracker as a value card. But just take the current standard build and then give it access to A, better mana, and B, Hangerback Walker. And just imagine how grossly insane that deck gets. So you have just Walking Ballista and Hangerback Walker as well.
Yeah. Yikes.
Like I've seen Fatal push my own 11/11 Hangerback Walker on your end step and then have 11 flying power.
And then one Metallic Mimic in play, and they're all big.
No, well, they don't have Metallic Mimic in play because that's like, going a little deep. But then you could definitely just slam a Nissa and +1 the whole team, or 2 if you have a Snake, or 3 if you have 2 of them. Just absurd amounts of power added to the board. 20, 25 power added to the board in one turn.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty disgusting to me.
Yeah, it is very, very impressive card combination, and Fatal Push plus Dromoka's Command is like enough removal to be able to kill someone on like turn 4 or 5 while interacting every step of the way. So that was sort of like my takeaway. But most people just said that they were happy to just play Frontier. That it's a fun format still, and they're happy that we're hosting more competitive large-scale tournaments that people are willing to travel for. And everybody I talked to in the local area was either a definite yes or a definite no for their family day. So I presume the next event, which is in 3 weeks, will have an even larger attendance and even more excitement for Frontier, even coming into Modern Masters spoilers.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I wonder if we can talk about Modern Masters later, but I wonder if we're predicting any cards that are going to be in Frontier, if they're all going to be older. I don't know. They haven't showed us anything yet, which is very strange for a set that's coming out very soon without spoilers.
We may get fetches in them, like all 10 fetches, and if we do, then that means we're probably not. Here's me going off the deep end. Okay, get ready to be able to cut this out, or it goes crazy. If we get all 10 fetches in Modern Masters 2017, that means we're not getting fetches in Standard anytime soon, which means when Wizards takes over Frontier, it will be at Origins and not Cons, because it's supposed to be either a all fetch inclusive or no fetch inclusive format.
Really?
Oh, interesting. So you think that they'll change the starting point?
I mean, I really honestly do. I don't think they want it to be a Jace Dig Through Time format, and they can only fix their mistakes with fetch lands by still creating perfect mana, by producing new types of lands in newer sets, right? Like every set that comes out is going to have some sort of rare land in it, and eventually your mana will be perfect and you won't need fetches to make it a playable environment, which means in, let's say, 2 years, 2 years is so long, like so many Magic sets are going to be out in the next 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So that's that. If we cut off Cons block and M15, you would solve a lot of the like broken card problems in Soul Artifact, Hangerback Walker, fetch lands, delve spells, Jace, all that stuff, whatever. I don't think they're broken right now, but I don't think you want that to be your format identity.
Right. Well, and also Mark Rosewater himself said in the answer to one of his like mailbag questions, whatever he does, like, what do you think about Frontier? He's like, oh, I think it should have started at Origins.
Right, like that. That's so ironic that he would just say it like that, because it's probably true, and heck, the set is called Origins.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, all of these things are like too conspiracy theory to like have anyone take me seriously when I tell them for real, but that's probably what I would expect over the next 2 years if I had to start putting it in recording now.
So what was the original explanation for why they called it Origins?
Because that was how your planeswalkers or something, their planeswalker story, they went from like creatures to planeswalkers or something.
Yeah, so they basically, with the storyline, they told the story of how the planeswalkers, like their spark was lit and they became the planeswalkers. So you go to there's cards from all their different planes where they came from. So that's actually where Kaladesh was created, was for Origins, and so there's a lot of cards in Origins that like Thopter Spy Network and all these cards that take place on Kaladesh, and then now we've gone to Kaladesh to see kind of what's happened. So it's part of their story push is where Origins came from, and so the beginning of the
it was their like redux at Future Sight.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, cool. So do you feel like for Frontier, from what you're seeing now from like a few weeks ago when we had our last podcast, do you feel like there's anything modern like as far as like stability yet? Like, are there decks that we're just seeing over and over again, or is it still just, man, people showing up with all kinds of different brews and you can never really predict what you're going to see?
So the things that stood out to me as being consistent is control decks got better. Fatal Push made Jeskai Black very good. Like, Fatal Push plus fetch lands is incredibly powerful tool. Also being able to flash it back with Jace as well as Torrential Gearhulk. These are all very strong plays. I saw a few different versions of Jeskai Black, Grixis. I played Jeskai. All of those are like sort of more viable now than they were before, better control decks. The second thing that I noticed is much less elf combo. I don't know if that was just the room, but there tend to be a lot of elf decks cropping up around the Atarka Red. Time when they were sort of racing to be the fastest combo deck, but now my third point is Jeskai Saheeli decks are absolutely real and totally playable in this format, and they are faster than the Atarka Red deck.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if they
is that like a copycat combo they're going for?
Exactly.
Or is that something different?
No, it's exactly that, just with better interaction and light removal. And I saw versions of Jeskai Black that just had 2 or 3 copies of each as just their finisher. Just play a full control game until you cast Dig Through Time and hit both of your kill spells and untap and play Saheeli, Felidar Guardian. And then the last thing, like I said, is Hardened Scales. Hardened Scales was the absolute... Hardened Scales plus Winding Constrictor was the absolute all-star of the tournament. It was just absolutely banana pants crazy every time. It got to just play all of its spells. And an aggressive deck that curves out at 3 tends to get to play all of its spells.
Yeah, no kidding. I actually played a version of that deck when we were testing our Demonic Pact deck that we did last time, and playing a Rishkar and immediately putting 3 counters on him feels pretty good when he comes into play.
Even the classic, if you take the standard example of turn 2 Snake, turn 3 Rishkar, and you have a 4/5 and a 4/4 on turn 3, that's really good. Like, that's really, really good. But you could also go turn 1 Hardened Scales, turn 2 Snake, turn 3 Rishkar, and it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Just gets nasty fast.
Like, I saw plays that were turn 1 Hardened Scales, turn 2 Fetch Land, play 2 Nairnem Renegades. They were 3/4s.
Yeah.
Yikes. Yeah, those things are really good too. I really like those Nairnem.
Yeah, however your accent wants to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that those guys are kind of an unsung hero of the Aether Revolt. I think they don't get nearly enough love because they have that Revolt trigger on them that not a lot of people pay attention to, I think, because Revolt seems a little gimmicky to me, unless you have fetch lands, in which case it's very, very easy to do.
Well, the next part is you also get Dramoka's Command, too. So in Frontier, you can just actually trade your 1-drop with anything.
Yep. So, yeah, exactly. Because you just fight it with it, yeah.
Exactly. They just fight it with the Death Touch. Kind of like the way in Modern that they're pairing Basilisk Collar with Walking Ballista to like make it like a Death Touch machine gun. You get to do that in this deck with Nairnem Renegade and Dramoka's Command. So Walking Ballista, Hardened Scales decks were, in my opinion, sort of the breakout deck and what people were having the most fun playing. And then lastly was Rally the Ancestors. It got Renegade Rallier, the namesake card, if you will. And a lot of people were on Rally because a lot of people came to this tournament to win. So there was probably 5 or 6 Rally decks in the tournament. So
how did they do?
All pretty well. I don't think any of them top 8'd. Don't quote me on it. I haven't got the results back, and I didn't top 8, so what do I know? So yeah. So I know they were at the top tables for the most part of the day. But the interesting part was that a lot of people were playing Rally. Like, it is still definitely deserves to be respected the way that it should at any tournament that is going to have spikes attended.
So one of the things that I've learned from playing in the events I played in and also playing with our testing is that it's just surprising the variety of decks that are real. Like, I was playing a control-ish deck because controlling was testing pretty well, like against the thing that worked really well in our Demonic Pact deck was how we controlled. And there are so many cards in Frontier that are just really efficient, awesome control cards, including Fatal Push, including Unlicensed Disintegration. But, every card with the word command on it is just really good. And there's all these different ones. And so you can really control the game really well. But also, I played against white weenies with basically, I was on the draw and I had a languish in my hand and I had my 4th mana in my hand. I was curving out and I died before my 4th turn to play it. Like
Yep.
really? Like I could just drop my swamp and kill all... Nope, I'm dead? Okay. All right, well, like it's crazy how fast some of these decks are, and there's just both, and that's just really cool.
Yeah, Fatal Push has done a lot to be able to slow down a bunch of the decks. So now you have not only just the red answers for your 1 and 2 drops, so you can actually get to your turn 3, turn 4. But you need to be doing something on turn 1 to 4 that's meaningful, or it's going to be a problem.
Seriously, because like I'm starting, like my stock in Radiant Flames has just gone way up. I'm like, wow, this you just need
It
it.
certainly has.
And to be honest, I played Kozilek's Return, and I cast a Kozilek's Return into a board of my Soulfire Grandmaster, so I was going to gain a bunch of life. And my opponent had a active Smuggler's Copter, a Mantis Rider, a Reflector Mage, and a Spell Queller.
And just missed everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I had instant speed. Yes, I had lifelink. I still only gained like 3 life from the whole interaction, and I lost my creature. Whereas Radiant Flames would have been able to crush them all. So there's a real sweet spot there, which makes me think Yahenni's expertise is going to be very good.
Well, that's true, but it still costs 4.
It's true. It's true.
Colin, that makes me wonder how much fun your turn burn would be to take to a tournament like this.
Yeah, we'd give it a shot. So this is a deck that we did as a side project, and it's your classic reactive deck where you draw and say go, but it's playing, it has the ability to play a lot of things like, on a big, tall, punishing deck like against Ormondal, you play Deflecting Palm. And... you can do there's Circle of Flames, I think is in there.
Circle of Flame that card's great
for the token decks. As an option.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it does.
So there's basically just trying to prepare for whatever strategy and just sit back and react.
It's a lot of counter spells. It's a lot of burn spells. It's 4 Storm Chaser mages and it's Jeskai. What was the name of the monkey you just talked about that you just wiped out of yours, Tony?
Soulfire Grandmaster.
Thank you, Soulfire.
Yeah.
It runs Soulfire Grandmasters. Yeah, so it runs Soulfire Grandmasters, and it's just a lot of fun. I think it's technically modern because I think we're running lightning bolts in it.
Yeah, but I don't think it would be too hard to make a Frontier version of that. So, tell you what, listeners, we'll make a Frontier version of this list, and we'll put it up on our Tapped Out, and I'll put a link to it on Twitter for this deck, because I think it's totally viable in this format too.
It's a lot of fun too. Let's see, I got it pulled up now.
Sweet.
I mean, it runs a couple things that aren't legal, like Rune Snags, but it runs negates, and it runs increasing vengeances, which obviously aren't standard legal, but we could find substitutes for that. Gutter Snipes are kind of a key to that deck, which I don't think are in Frontier.
No, the closest you have is Thermal Alchemist.
Right.
Which untaps when you cast. I guess it's +1 when you have a spell.
Yeah. But the Days Undoing, it runs 2 Days Undoings, which turns out to be an MVP for that deck, because when you just need that last extra little tiny bit of damage, you need to hit him for 5 or 6 more life. You just hit your Days Undoing and then hope to draw 2 lightning bolts.
2 burn spells, yeah. Well, from someone who just played a bunch of burn spells to try and get that little extra reach in Frontier, nope.
Were you running Days Undoing?
No, but it didn't matter.
Maybe that was your mistake. Are you sure?
Oh, yeah.
How do you know?
You're right, I don't know.
Graham, quit badgering the guest.
No, it's fine. You're right, I don't know.
No, so you were finding you had lightning strikes in your deck, right?
Yeah, lightning strikes and wild slashes, and it just never. It never amounted to enough. There's no such thing that will compare to Bolt Snap Bolt. That's just the amount of damage and pressure that puts on. No, Lightning Strike, Gearhulk, Lightning Strike is going to compare to that.
Right.
So, no free wins that way. You really have to, sort of earn them in Frontier, where you either, take control of the game and have a thing that you do that wins the game, or you attack with creatures and do it the old-fashioned way through combat. But, there's no oops, I wins on the burn Frontier.
Yep. It's great because I feel like I prefer games that are slightly more fair. Personally, that's just my personal preference, which is one of the reasons why I enjoy Standard. And I feel like Frontier is just like that extra little step of power level, but it's still pretty fair versus dying to on turn 2 or 3 in Modern without even getting to play. So I mean I like Modern too, but I'm certainly not an expert at that one. But yeah, I think it's great, and so I think that I'm excited to brew a new Frontier deck on the podcast today. We do have an idea. But before we get into it, I wanted to say that we just rattled off a lot of card names right there without really reading the cards. And I'm very sorry. This normally when we try to do things like that, we'll try to read or explain more of the things. I'm going to make sure that all of the names of cards that we just talked about are in the maybeboard on tappedout for the list that we're going to make today. So there'll be a link to our deck list in the show notes, and I'll put it out on Twitter as well. And it'll have in the maybeboard all of these cards that we just rattled off so that you can read them, because that was pretty fast, and we want to make sure that everybody can sort of keep up with the conversation. So if you're listening, go and check that out and know that that's where you can find those things generally when you're listening to our podcast, because we want to make sure that everybody can kind of follow along. So that said, we are now going to go ahead and move into our live brew for the day. And we are going to be working with a card that didn't really see a whole lot of Standard play, but I feel like with some extra cards in the pool could be pretty potent in Frontier. And the card is called Assault Formation. And Assault Formation is an enchantment for 1 and a green that says each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. It also has 2 activated abilities, one for just a green. Target creature with Defender can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. And for 2 and a green, creatures you control get +0/+1 until end of turn. So this can be abused by playing cheap high toughness creatures and then dropping in an assault formation, and all of a sudden you're swinging in for really big damage instead of blocking their creatures. And so that's sort of the one part of this. And then we also are thinking about using a second enchantment that would make this even more potent, and it's called Behind the Scenes. So Graham, why don't you talk a little bit about Behind the Scenes, how that works, and why we would want to include this in an assault formation deck.
Sure. So Behind the Scenes is a really cool card. It's 2 and a black, and it says creatures you control have Skulk. And Skulk is a relatively new ability to the world of Magic the Gathering, and it says that creatures with Skulk can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. So if you pair that with a bunch of creatures that we're going to be playing in an assault formation deck, think 1/4s and 0/3s and 0/5s. You pair that with an ability like Skulk, and it makes it really easy to do a lot of damage very quickly without your opponent being able to block it effectively unless they're running a bunch of 1/1 creatures, which happens a lot. But if our power is 0, you can't block them, period. It basically makes them unblockable, and it grants that to all of your creatures. And that is just kind of a disgusting fun thing to do. It additionally has an activated ability for 4 and a white. You can give creatures you control +1/+1 until end of turn. But that's kind of a silly aside that doesn't really matter in terms of what the card's going to do for us in this deck.
Right. So we're going to try to set up a deck that sort of abuses this, but we have Tony here to make sure that we don't Johnny ourselves into the corner and actually put some good Frontier staples in the deck to make sure that we can survive.
Come now, Colin. We don't do that ever. That never happens.
We've done it. We are guilty, and we are learning, and we're getting better, and it's going to be great. So obviously, there are assault formations on the list, and we are thinking about using Behind the Scenes, which puts us into green and black. I hear those colors are good right now. Do we want to talk about a third color before we get moving, or do we feel like green and black is enough for what we're trying to do?
I think there's probably something to be said for green-black, but I think that we can gain a little bit more power if we add a third color. My initial thoughts would be white, just based on the sheer number of very low-cost, high-toughness creature. Off the top of my head, I got Yoked Ox, which is a 0/4. I've got Tasseled Dromedary, also a 0/4. Those are great 1-drops. Or Dragon's Eye Sentry, which is a 1/3 Defender First Strike, which is great. Those are all great 1-drops in white that we could run in this deck that would definitely take advantage of the Assault Formation advantage breakingness, if you will. Coining that phrase.
Breakingness, I like it.
All right, I'll reel you in here a little bit already because what we want if the splash color is white is for it to not be our 1-drops. For example, we want to be able to have white to activate behind the scenes on turn 5 or 6, but we don't want to have to choose between a black 1-drop, a white drop 1-drop, and a green 1-drop. Now, where this gets really sweet is we have 2 different black-green untapped lands in Llanowar Waste and Blooming Marsh. I always get that one.
It's Blooming Marsh. Yep.
Blooming Marsh.
They mean the same thing.
I know. Yeah. So we have Llanowar Waste and Blooming Marsh for black-green 1-drops, and I think those are already sort of some of the better 1-drops, but I do like the option of having white as a splash color. I think we should just look at anything that costs white should cost at least 3 or 4 mana and probably not cost double white at all.
Okay.
Look at this guy bringing the voice of reason.
Well, and that is if we're gonna go, because I think that there's some arguments to be made for red, and there's some arguments to be made for blue as well. So I'd be interested to see what are you guys thinking of those two, because we have talked about the aforementioned importance of sweepers, and so I mean, are there anything that we could do?
Oh, actually, that brings up a great point for me in this particular deck, because we have so much toughness going on, or theoretically we are going to have so much toughness. We can run cards like Henny's Expertise or one of the many other black spells that gives all creatures -3/-3 or -2/-2, or even Languish if we want, pretty much with impunity without wiping out our entire board, because all of our creatures theoretically are going to have pretty high toughness.
I think Languish would be tough. There's not much that is going to give us 5 toughness.
Yeah, probably not Languish, but but definitely Henny's Expertise. And I can't tell you off the top of my head what they are, but I know there's a couple of older spells from like the Battle for Zendikar block that were -2/-2 sweepers.
Yeah, Flaying Tendrils is actually pretty.
That's the one.
Pretty exciting, and then there's some other ones, Biting Rain, and less
yeah.
good. But I think you're actually totally correct with this sort of line of thinking. And within our colors, I think we're going to find more than enough cards that are just good cards on their own that get better when they get to swing with their butt.
Okay, somebody said blue earlier. What do we got in blue that would be good in this deck?
Well, the exciting part about blue, too, is between blue and green, you get the fast land again, Botanical Sanctum. So I think like black and green and blue and green means you're like anchor color green, which lets you have, mana dorks. There's the interesting 1/3 mana dork for 2 mana that adds a green. That guy's cool.
You also got Yavimaya Coast in there.
Yavimaya Coast in there. Yeah, they all have their pairs, the fast lands, which is sweet. But blue at 2 gives us the Contraband Kingpin, which to me is sort of the most exciting reason to play blue. It's a 1/4 with lifelink that whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you get to scry 1. So the problem is artifacts aren't really super great. But again, I'll just chain off here. The 2 artifacts that were exciting were, we talked about it, Cathar's Shield, the 0 mana, 3 to equip, +0/+3, and Vigilance. We forgot about the Vigilance. That's really cool. But also Ornithopter. Ornithopter is a 0 mana flying 2/2 that lets you scry for, when you put it into play with, Assault Formation in play.
That's a very interesting point. I hadn't even considered Ornithopter. So actually, to me, Contraband Kingpin is exciting for a number of reasons. First of all, it's vanilla if we have Assault Formation, big if. It is a 4/4 lifelink.
Well, it's a 1/4.
Excuse me, 1/4 lifelink for 2, which is great. But if we have Assault Formation, it essentially becomes a 4/4 lifelink for 2. And then the artifact trigger is just kind of the cherry on top.
Well, I don't feel like playing a Tireless Tracker in the deck is bad at all. Even if you don't have the Contraband Kingpin yet to be able to scry every time you play a land. you can still get your clues.
Yeah, but I don't think that. I feel like Tireless Tracker, while it's an awesome card, is also kind of hurt by Assault Formation because it nerfs its own damage.
Can you say what you mean?
It's forced to attack with its toughness, right?
Right, exactly. So its toughness is lower than its power, so you're basically giving it a -1, -0 with an Assault Formation.
Sure, but it's
isn't necessarily a huge thing, but it is an artifact engine. I'm not sure that artifacts necessarily need to be the focus of the deck. I think that if we take Tony's idea, and I love the Ornithopter idea. I hadn't even considered that. The Ornithopter idea, and then we can talk about the Cathar Shield.
Mm-hmm.
That might be enough. That's 8 artifacts right there.
So are we leaning towards green, blue, and green, blue, and black, which is Sultai? Because I kind of like that idea.
I kind of do too. I don't really. I had some great ideas for white, but I hadn't considered the Contraband Kingpin. In addition, there's actually a really good blue 1-drop for this deck that could be interesting in Sidisi's. Where'd it go? I have it. Sidisi's Faithful.
Black, isn't it?
That's right. No, it's blue. It's 1 blue for a 0/4, and it has exploit. It says when it exploits a creature, return target creature to its owner's hand. So you can have a little fun with your opponent too, or we can bounce something of our own that has a good enter the battlefield ability if need be, or we can.
So the other part real quick is there's an 0/4 in black that has Outlast. I forget the name of it. Disowned Ancestor.
Oh, it's Disowned Ancestor. Okay. I see that.
So
one
the
as well.
reason that's more interesting than the Sidisi's Faithful is simply because black is the it's easier to get black and green than it is to get black and blue. Black and blue is difficult to get. That 2-color combination is hard to get. So we shouldn't expect Contraband Kingpin to be on curve. It's the card that, like, when we play it, it's going to be sweet. I think the curve needs to be what do we play first, and then we play Assault Formation.
Okay.
So I think we should consider the blue cards with the green or the black cards with the green.
Okay, so but what about like blue and colorless 2-drop? Do you think that would be we could consider like 1 and a blue on curve?
That's perfect because then you have the 2 you have Yavimikos and Botanical Sanctum.
Okay, so then in that case, I would like to submit Tide Drifter, which is a 0/4 for 1 and a blue, and all your colorless creatures get +0/+1. So that would actually turn your Ornithopter into a 0/3.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's great. Do we have other colorless creatures that can take advantage of that though? That's the big one. Otherwise,
we just need to look in Devoid. That's the interesting part. Bentic Infiltrator, that one, yeah.
And that one's really cool because that one's unblockable.
Yeah,
and it's
a 1/4, right?
Bonus. It is a 1/4 unblockable, and I think that it has a damage ability too.
Yeah, it's got ingest.
It has ingest, right? Unblockable, 1/4, 2 and a blue. Another interesting card that we could consider for this deck is also a blue. It's 1 and a blue, and it is Shielded Aether Thief. It's got flash, and it says whenever Shielded Aether Thief blocks, you get an energy, and you can tap it and pay 3 energy to draw a card.
Yeah, that guy's actually pretty sweet. That's just like a flash blocker. Like that's like just a removal spell that turns into a 4/4.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in this deck, if we have an Assault Formation in play. Not to mention, if we can talk about some energy cards or Aether Hubs and try to get a little bit of an energy angle and use it for some card draw later in the game if need be.
Yeah, definitely. And then, I mean, if we're still looking for colorless ones, there is a total Johnny card, which is Guardians of Meletis, something like that, which is 3 colorless for an 06 defender.
Nice. Just a big dumb idiot.
Right. So.
Oh, actually, that's an interesting one because there's another card that would pair up really nicely with that, and it's a sorcery, and it's called Kintree Invocation. And Kintree Invocation costs black-green, and it's a sorcery that says put an XX black and green Spirit Warrior creature token onto the battlefield, where X is the greatest toughness among creatures you control. So, if we happen to have cast Colin's Johnny creature on the prior turn, the hero protector of Meletis.
Guardians
Meletis.
of Meletis.
Thank you. Guardian of Meletis. Potentially, we have a 6/6 creature on turn 3, and we don't even need an Assault Formation to make him a 6/6 creature.
Okay,
and he doesn't have Defender.
I really like that card, but let's look at it a little more seriously and pretend like we don't have a really bad unplayable 0/6 wall.
I know.
And it's
Yeah.
just...
I'm going to have to agree with
But
Tony on
then
this one.
it's just like a turn 3 4/4. And that's
Yeah,
still
or-
pretty good, right? Or better.
Right.
Or 5/5 if we
Exactly.
have a
So-
Tide Drifter in it. Or 5/5, yeah.
Exactly.
So
Tide
here's my
Drifter in
question.
play.
Here's my question, because I completely agree that I'm not into the Guardians, but we were looking for colorless creatures, so I put it out there. But
Yep, you did.
the question I have is, are we going to this is sort of a direction for the deck too, as far as numbers and how we decide to put it together. Are we going to put 28 to 30 creatures in and then run collected companies, or are we going to play a more mid-rangey strategy that uses removal and control spells and runs less creatures and doesn't run collected company? Like, what do we think?
I don't think there's any reason to cast a single creature that costs less than...
You mean more than 3?
More than 3,
Sure,
excuse me.
but
Now,
collected company, you just need the numbers in order to get a good enough, percentage to hit.
Yeah, and you don't have the numbers if you're playing Assault Formation and Behind the Scenes.
Behind the scenes. You think that
Well,
those
that's
two
like
cards alone are enough
plus
to...
collected company, so that's 12. So that leaves you at most 28 hits if you only play 20 lands.
Right. So yeah.
Right, that's a good argument.
Okay. So because that will definitely sort of help me understand which creatures I like better if we're playing. Because I feel like we could go in the energy direction, and I think there's actually a green-blue energy creature that's just good in standard right now. What's it called?
Oh, the Rogue
Refiner. Yeah.
So he attacks with 3 power and 2 toughness, but the thing that we can totally rely on here is that we can just still play all of our creatures don't have to have more toughness than power. So if we need something to fill our curve or be in the proper slot, and our budget dictates we have room for it, we can always play honestly any deck can play Walking Ballista or Hangerback Walker or classic cards that we didn't really talk about, Sylvan Advocate. These are all just good cards on their own that don't all need to be centered around having an X5 in play. We didn't even talk about removal, right? If we get to play fetch lands and that's the direction that we go, which I don't think we need to with black, green, blue. You don't really need to. Maybe Fatal Push is really sweet. But if we're playing some spells and things that go to the graveyard, we might want a couple Murderous Cuts. But I think we should have an exciting plethora of creatures, around 25 of them, because they should be hard to kill, and any of the things that we're going to try and do should make them unblockable.
So actually, I have a thought on the unblockableness. I found an interesting card while I was digging, and let me see if I can find it again. Oh, here it is. It's from Cons, and it's 2 and a green. It's called Roar of Challenge, and it says all creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. And it has a ferocious ability. That creature gains indestructible until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. That part is a little
harder in this deck.
uninteresting in this particular deck. Right. However, the ability to focus all of our opponent's blockers on a single one of our creatures, if we only have 3 or 4 creatures in play, that's still potentially lethal damage on the board if they're blocking one of them, just because of the high amount of damage each of our creatures is doing.
That's true.
Kind of like an alternative to Skulk.
Right, yeah. If the Skulk doesn't work for us, you have 1 or 2 of these. It wouldn't be a 4 of probably in the deck, but it would be something, an alternative method of evasion in the deck, as opposed to something like Trample or Unblockable or something like that.
Well, there's a 2-mana blue creature that's just a 1/3 with Skulk, correct? That's one of the ones we were first talking about?
I don't know if we've actually talked about that one yet. I know the one you're speaking of. Is it the Fogwalker?
Yeah, Fogwalker. Okay, so on curve, you get to equip a Cathar's shield to that and bash for 6.
That's true. That's pretty nasty.
So maybe, like, if we want to start consistently, maybe we want to start with sort of that, and then our top end being the Kin Tree Invocation would make us a 6/6 on turn 4.
That's right.
Right. And then another idea is we could run Skeleton Key, which is a 1-mana artifact that gives equipped creature Skulk, and it lets you loot if it deals damage to a player, and it costs equip 2. So it would
Do you have to pay for the loot, or do you just get to loot?
No, whenever it basically turns into a rogue, so whenever it deals damage to a player, you can loot.
Yeah, this thing seems sweet.
So that goes nicely with also because it's an artifact that's good against with the
Contraband Kingpin,
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So do we want to talk about removal for this
what
deck?
other creatures actually have Skulk? Because maybe if we just have a bunch of creatures with Skulk,
We don't need the enchantment, yeah.
Well, I'm looking at a lot of them right now, and there's there's Farbog Revenant, which is a good option. So that's 2 and a black for a 1/3 Skulk lifelink, and lifelink is never really a bad thing to have in your back pocket.
well, if we have it on the Contraband Kingpin too, then we're comboing off there.
Yep. So we got Farbog Revenant. There's the aforementioned Fogwalker.
Well, Vampire Cutthroat is a 1/1 with Skulk and lifelink for 1 in black.
Yeah, there's also Rancid Rats, which is a 1/1 Skulk and Death Touch for 1. I'm not sure that 1/1s are really.
That's what I was
No,
gonna
but
ask.
once we put the Cathar's shield on them, then they're hard to deal with, but once we can attack with their butts, then they're big, right?
Yeah, once we can. But I'm just worried about goblin tokens. I'm worried about plant tokens, just sort of chumping us. And then in the case of the Vampire Cutthroat, if we don't have a shield or if it's turn 2, then we're stuck with not being able to attack.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm more drawn to the higher toughness creatures, just because worst case scenario, we can block with them, kind of like hold the fort, if you will, for a while.
Right. And so that's definitely attractive to me. Tony, what type of threats are we looking at on turn 3 or 4 in terms of power that we have to be able to block pretty easily if we're going to be blocking? Just from your experience.
Yeah, some of the things that you can expect to interact with on turn 3 or 4 are going to be like Reflector Mages. So we can't invest like too much into what's going on without it just, being put back in our hand. Fatal Push is a thing that always needs to be considered now because it's found a home in Modern and Frontier with fetch lands. So that's also super important. So you need to understand that you need to be getting a reasonable amount of value out of your 2-drop and your 1-drop because it's probably going to trade down. And then some of the bigger threats are a Hardened Scales. Nairnam Renegade is going to be a 3/4 Death Touch. Anafenzas sometimes come down as early as turn 2 or turn 3. Anafenza the Foremost, she's a 4/4. Turn 4 Siege Rhinos for sure.
So that's helpful. So basically what I'm seeing is a lot of 3 and 4 power pretty consistently on turn 3 or 4.
That's reasonable, yes.
Okay. So yeah, so that's why I was wondering if we could still think about, colorless or devoid creatures and look in that direction, because I feel like we'll be able to get, our benthic infiltrators and ornithopters, and so that's why the Tide Drifter thing is sort of appealing to me, because it gives us a little bit more of survivability.
Okay, so let's reimagine a little bit and go back to the drawing board, not get so locked into Contraband Kingpin, and let's look at rug colors.
Okay. Oh, okay. So what do we have?
Because there's a lot of really good Devoid cards that are also red.
Okay.
So the one that I really like was one of the ones that was used in the Pro Tour winning list that everyone's like, wow, this is a really good card. I never knew. Vile Aggregate.
Yeah.
So it gets bigger than a 5/5 if you have enough colorless creatures out and we don't have Assault Formation. But without Assault Formation, this is one of the strongest cards that we can have in our deck.
Right. If we go in the Devoid direction.
Actually, Blinding Drone might be something to consider as well. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Devoid, and it also can really annoy our opponents by tapping down their creatures.
But we have to have a colorless specific mana to tap down their creature.
That shouldn't be too difficult if we're running Yavimaya Coasts and
that's true. Yavimaya Coast and
other Pain lands.
No, that's true.
Shivan Reef is in
Reef,
this
yeah.
color combination too.
There we go, Shivan Reef, yeah.
So Blinding Drone is a really exciting one in my opinion. And then, like you said, we talked about Tide Drifter, the 0/5 for 2 mana. That's a really sweet one at 2. We also get Ornithopter, which is really, really strong in a deck like this.
Right. Kozilek Sentinel is a 1/4 for 1 in a red.
You know, though, we could stick with our bug colors because there's also Catacomb Drifter, which is 2/3, and that gives us an additional colorless Eldrazi Scion, which we can use to block and or give us mana. If we wanted to go super on the higher end, you got something like Dread Defiler, which is 6 and a black, which is a little bit tall, but also it's a 6/8, also known as an 8/8 in this particular case.
What I like about a version that is red, blue, splash, green, it takes a lot of the pressure off of your mana base for starters, because you have Spire, Bluff Canal, and Shivan Reef. But if we go with a sort of more Eldrazi-centric theme, it doesn't need to be all about having an Assault Formation. Assault Formation is kind of bonus, because if you look at cards like Kozilek Sentinels and Vile Aggregate and things like that, then maybe we want to just look at a card like Ghostfire Blade. So we can just guaranteed have plus power is not out of the question, right?
Right.
It's just
certainly not.
Plus toughness is optimal. So something like Ghostfire Blade going on to an Ornithopter on turn 2 and having a 2/4 is a pretty good game plan generally speaking. So maybe we do look at red blue centric cards with a splash of the green.
Right.
A splash of the greens.
Splash of the green. And that would actually allow us to play the sweepers. So we could play Radiant Flames.
Sure. Yeah, we could definitely play Radiant Flames in a build like this.
I'm liking this. I'm sad about the Kingpin. I was pumped about the Kingpin.
I was kind of pumped about the Kingpin as well.
But
blue black stuff is actually hard to cast on turn 2.
Yeah.
Even casting Jace on turn 2, you basically have to sacrifice having a turn 1 play to be able to cast Jace on turn 2. So if it's not as strong as casting Jace on turn 2, it's probably the wrong 2-drop for blue. Right. So I actually really like this direction of the Eldrazi creatures. Now, something like Vile Aggregate gets paid off by having Eldrazi Scions.
Right. That's true. Well, there's also Herald of Kozilek, which is 1 blue-red for a 2/4 devoid, and colorless spells you cast cost sweet. 1 less to cast. So
yeah, that thing's sweet.
So that's definitely an option. Then we could, interaction, we could play Horribly Awry, because I think there's the other creature we talked about earlier, Kozilek Sentinel, get +1/+0 if we cast a colorless counterspell too. Yeah, I mean, I'm digging this direction too.
Here's a card I really like as a splash is Void Grafter. So it's a 2/4/1, a green and a blue. It's devoid. It's also got flash, and when it enters the battlefield, another target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. That card is very good for 3 mana.
Yeah, I was looking at Elder Deep Fiend.
Sure.
As a nice finisher.
Everybody loves the party squid. Honestly, if you want this, it would totally be reasonable to make this actually an Eldrazi swing with your butt deck, because you on your high end you could have World Breaker, which actually has more toughness than defense. You could have Oblivion Sower at 6, which has more toughness than defense, and you could play Kozilek's Return, which would actually trigger off some of this high end stuff to just be able to dominate a board that has been overrun by small creatures.
And Herald, for that matter.
It's almost like we found one of those things that they made for us.
That's true.
Interesting. Okay, I'm into this.
I actually think Void Grafter is one of the underrated cards that just isn't played. It's in the same cycle as Reflector Mage, and then they made Spell Queller a rare. But a 2/4 for 3 mana, even if you have Elvish Mystic in your deck, on turn 2 you get to play a 2/4 with flash. That's as crazy as Boon Satyr. And that card, you didn't play with that card. Boon Satyr was a crazy card. It was a 4/2 for 1 green with flash, and then for 5 mana you could bestow it on something.
Huh.
But on turn 2 in the green aggressive decks, you would just go end step, play a 4/2, untap, put like Rancor on it, bash you with a 6/2 trample, and then have like Vines of Vastwood with kicker up. So if they try to kill it, you're like, prevent your thing, and you take 10 this turn.
Yeah, that seems good.
It was just, and that was just mono green.
Yeah. Okay, so you're feeling like we're getting.
I think
going the Eldrazi thing.
blue red Eldrazi splash Assault Formation is one of those things that they gave you a pre-built archetype like Eldrazi, and then it wasn't meant to play with Assault Formation.
Right, but it's good, really good with it, with all the toughness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so can we talk about interactions then? So if we're running 24-ish creatures, do we want to play counter spells? Do we want to play removal? Do we want to play card draw?
So here's the thing: if all of our creatures, if we don't go so far as to play Elder Deep Fiend and we sort of like actually cap it at 3 CMC, and all we have is Assault Formation, we could actually go light on removal and play Collected Company.
Okay.
So I'm looking at all the Eldrazi that we have here right now, and what are we looking at for 1-drops? What's our turn 1?
So it's not necessarily that we have things that cost 1 mana, but Ornithopter should help fill that role, as well as
Do we hold a
Ghostfire Blade is another important one.
Excuse me.
Right?
We're not even playing black. What about something like Blister Pod? Is that worth it in a deck like this to ramp us into something larger?
I think it's worth holding open a slot, but between Ornithopter and Ghostfire Blade, that's sort of like 8 1-drops, sort of.
Well, I guess it depends. If we're going the Collected Company route with the low curve, then it makes sense to play Blister Pod because it's 2 chump blocks at the very least to, slow down the deck that is trying to hammer you really fast.
But it's actually the least amount of value out of Collected Company, right? Because you're only cheating in 1 mana worth of creatures instead of 3.
Right, that's true. That is if you hit it with the Collected Company, you probably wouldn't choose it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It just makes your potential Collected Companies worse.
Okay.
Do we want to run something like an endless one that could be as little as 1/1 and as big as however the hell big we want to make it?
Also bad with Collected Company.
Well, obviously with Collected Company it's bad. I realize that, but we also don't have to choose it with Collected Company.
If you play Collected Company, it has to be the best card in your deck, or you shouldn't be playing it. Like, it just needs to be 2 hits every time. They're just insane. What it makes us want to play with Collected Company is it makes us want to play things like Eldrazi Sky Spawner and Catacomb Sifter. I know we're not in black. I'm just using examples because those are actually just straight up 2-for-1s. So off Collected Company, you could hit 4 creatures. So anything less than that, there sort of has to be like a real good reason. Like if we got 2 Tide Drifters out of it, that means we would make like 2 0/6s for 4 mana, which is like pretty good. But that doesn't actually do anything unless we have Assault Formation.
Right. So in your experience, Tony, which do you feel like has the best EV? Going big with the World Breaker and the Elder Deep Fiend, or going small and running Collected Companies?
I think that we will have more success going big.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go big.
Okay.
Yeah, I personally really like the card Oblivion Sower. Well, it's really exciting, especially in Frontier when everyone plays Delve spells.
Can you read it, Tony, for the listeners?
So, Oblivion Sower is a 5/6 or a 5/8 for 6 colorless mana. And when you cast it, you exile the top 4 cards of your opponent's library. And then after you exile those 4 cards, you can take any number of lands they have in exile and put them into play under your control.
Yep.
So if they've cast Dig Through Time on turn 4, chances are you're going to get 3 other fetch lands. Well, plus whatever you pull off the top. So I've seen hits of 10, 12 lands off of an Oblivion Sower.
So endless one then.
Well, I mean, Endless One is one way to go about it if we're concerned about filling the curve and having like early creatures, or if we are happy with our 2 mana 0/5s that are going to get us to later game stuff, then maybe we should.
Right, Endless One might be a good card for a sideboard if we know we're playing a deck that dumps a bunch of land.
Well, don't forget
Exactly.
we also talked about Skeleton Key as a potential 1-drop also. That's useful.
Yes, that's very true. We did talk about that, and that's a really sweet one in this deck still.
I think it's still valid, even though we don't need the artifact synergy anymore. In particular, it's still a colorless spell, so it'll trigger a couple of things.
Well, the other thing,
Right, and what about something like Prophet of Distortion as a 1-drop too? It's a 1/2, so with Assault Formation it does 2 damage, but later in the game it's just a pay for draw, which is usually a pretty good thing to have.
yeah, I mean, like I said, we don't have to. Toughness isn't the most important thing. Like, we can play a 2/1 and be happy with it, or whatever comes on early there too. But some of the cards that just are generally good are like Hangerback Walker is a totally fine creature to have as like an early drop, especially when something like Vile Aggregate, if they ever kill your Hangerback Walker, just goes through the roof. Walking Ballista is like another fine card there, but what I like about the 1 and 2 drops is that they're sort of flexible, like that Ghostfire Blade and maybe Skeleton Key. You get them out of the way, you know what I mean? Like you put them on the battlefield when they're the turn you're giving up to play them is the least significant.
You don't have to play them on turn 1. You can play them whenever it suits you. Maybe you play a 2-drop on turn 3, and then you have an extra mana.
Exactly.
So you play your 1-drop on top of it.
Exactly.
Yep.
I really like Ghostfire Blade in this, the more that I think about it, because just having like a turn 3, you could play Ghostfire Blade and put it on your Tide Drifter, and then you just have a 2/7.
Yeah.
Like, there's like nothing that beats through that. No Siege Rhinos, no Gear Hulks, like nothing punches through that. So then you're just setting up your defense.
Right, so I think that we probably should still run Radiant Flames, Colin. What do you think about that?
I think absolutely.
It's just too good
So
of
if
a
we're going,
sweeper.
especially if we're going big.
Well, the question is, if you're going big, do you want to go big enough to play Kozilek's Return, where you can get value off of it from, say, a World Breaker or an Elder Deep Fiend? So the real question becomes, like, are you okay? Do you want a sweeper so good that it kills everything except for the thing that you played to cast it? Or do we want to be able to, like, play a sweeper on turn 3 and have our 1 and 2 drops survive? What do we feel like?
I feel like we probably still could play that sweeper on turn 2 or 3 and still have our 1 and 2 drops survive with the ones we've chosen.
I think that this is a little bit of an example of where our gap in knowledge is going to
exactly.
Because to me, Radiant Flames is like, it's ideal because it takes out vehicle pilots, it takes out winding constrictors, it takes out all of the things that make standard decks nasty and annoying and big and gross. But from a Frontier standpoint, I couldn't answer that question for you.
So this is always the eternal debate, and I lost it with my metagame call this weekend. Are you concerned about playing the game later than turn 6 or 7? So, are you an aggressive deck that's going to try and end the game before Gearhulks come down and stonewall you? Or do you want to have Gearhulks, bad example because it's an X6, but or do you want to have game against like a Hardened Scales deck that's like already kind of gone off a little bit when you're going to be able to flashback Kozilek's Return? Because Kozilek's Return does not hit a lot of the very good 2 and 3 drop creatures in the format. It doesn't hit Smuggler's Copter even though it's instant. It doesn't hit Reflector Mage. It doesn't hit Winding Constrictor. It doesn't hit Sylvan Advocate. It doesn't hit Spell Queller. And it doesn't hit Mantis Rider. Those are like just ones I can think of right now. But all of those decks that I just named that plays those cards are even more devastated by a flashback Kozilek's Return, because they've committed so much more to the board.
Right. So
basically what it comes down to is, do we want to play like 1 or 2 high-end guys, or do we want our top end to stop at Oblivion Sower, which means we can't really take advantage of having the infinite mana we've stolen from our opponents? Or do we want to play like 4 Elder Deep Fiends and we're going to tap down their blockers that way, like a removal spell? So we're basically going to plan on flashing back a Kozilek's Return sometime around turn 6. Like, that's the goal.
So I have one question before I answer, because I just want a little bit of clarification or an opinion about the using Kozilek's Return. Do you feel like Kozilek's Return is still worthwhile if you don't have a way to discard it early. Because there's like that's a lot of people or a lot of decks that do this quickly will run things like Cathartic Reunion or Tormenting Voice to pitch specifically to put Kozilek's Return in the graveyard for Elder Deep Fiend to come hit. Do you feel like in a deck where you'd have to cast it once and potentially hurt your own board and potentially not hit the 2 and 3 drops that we were talking about that end up having 3 toughness in the format ahead of time is worth it to put it in the graveyard?
That's actually a very, very good question, because the thing that I get stuck on is that Kozilek's Return will never kill our creatures. That's the thing. Like, it's always just going to be potentially one-sided the first half of it. So the question is, does it do nothing or does it do something to our opponent? Because it's never going to actually kill our creatures because we have a bunch of O5s and things like that. And I think Elder Deep Fiend is actually good enough and powerful enough that playing Kozilek's Return in a deck like this I think it's a good idea. I think going right up, doing the 4 Elder Deep Fiends and maybe like 1 World Breaker is actually probably a very good spot to be in the metagame right now. It's going to help you kill like Tassigurs and a bunch of the like push proof creatures. And having the flashback on Kozilek's Return is very, very strong against all of the Kalatas decks if they've managed to amass an army of zombies against you.
Okay. No, I think that's okay. So it's just I don't want to. It just sucks if you're holding the Kozilek's Return and you're just looking at the Hardened Scales deck and you're like, well, this isn't going to do anything the first time. So
that's what sideboards.
Yeah,
are for,
exactly.
like,
And sometimes that happens, but sometimes on turn 3 they'll have played like they played like a snake on turn 3, but on turn 1 and 2 they played like 2 1-drops, and you're like, oh man, this Kozilek's Return is still a 2 for 1.
Right, that's true. It only has to be a 2 for 1, especially if you can hit it later. Okay, I'm into that. I think that we can do that. So we can run the 4 Elder Deep Fiends, 1 World Breaker, and for our top end, that seems good. So the one that sticks out then, if we're looking at dodging Kozilek's Return right now, is Hangerback Walker. Is that still as powerful as we want?
Hangerback Walker is probably not what we're looking for in a deck like this, to be perfectly honest.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, that's just a generally good card. But what I did want to say is with Kozilek's Return is we can attack with our 1/5s or there's not really going to be any combat interaction. But then we can follow up with the Kozilek's Return to get like a 3rd and 4th point of damage in, where our creatures are still probably survive.
Right, but remember, we are still running Assault Formation, so those 1/5s are really swinging for 5.
Well
sometimes. If we're swinging for 5s, then their creatures are chump blocking, or they're taking 5 damage. Whereas if we attack with a 1/4 and they have like a Reflector Mage or something, chances are they're going to block. And then Kozilek's Return still gets to do the 3rd point of damage, right? Or they know Kozilek's Return is in your hand, and they just have to take 1, and it's as though our creatures have Skulk anyways.
Right. Okay, so we're still looking at Ghostfire Blades because those are good for what we're doing. We're still looking at Ornithopters. We're still looking at Skeleton Keys. And then we've got a bunch of creatures, at the top of which we're looking at Elder Deep Fiends and World Breakers. But it's still important that we get the Kozilek's Return. So what type of... Should we run 4 card draw spells just to be sure? Or just because? Like, should we leave... Is that a good number to leave in a deck is 4 card draw spots?
Honestly, I would probably just run 4 Kozilek's Returns.
Okay.
And then just instead of playing a spell to find another spell when we need it, we'll just continue to play our original game plan, which is have Assault Formation to make all of our creatures bigger than yours for half the cost.
Okay.
Yes, and also consider if we run 4 Benthic Infiltrators, starting on turn 4, they're going to be taking 4 damage per turn. That starts a clock pretty quick.
That's a very fast clock, yeah. And even, honestly, if we go turn 1 Ornithopter, when a Lamb, turn 2, put the Ghostfire Blade on it, like, they're taking 2, that's 10% of their life. After 3 turns, do you think it's probably challenging to deal with a 2/4 flyer without spending, like, a Fatal Push or, like, a real removal spell on it.
Right. Yeah, and not to mention that 2/4 is likely going to turn into a 4/4 at some point in the near future.
That would be ideal, right?
Yeah, but just like Tony said earlier, I don't want to rely on the Assault Formation, but I feel like we can.
We're not. Then that's we're talking about how good the deck is without the Assault Formation here as well.
Yeah, and then it just gets better. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that chip damage, it definitely adds up. If you can get... Man, if an Ornithopter can deal 6 damage, that's a good Ornithopter.
That's true.
Not bad for 0 cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Man, imagine some affinity turns where we get to go, like, turn 1, 3 Ornithopters, turn 2, Assault Formation, attack for 6.
Yeah. I mean, it could happen, I guess.
It definitely could happen.
Yeah. Okay. So 4 Ornithopters then. And so are you still feeling like 24, 25 is a good target for creatures?
Now we can probably be a little more flexible when we get to if and when we want removal spells, because we can go 2 ways.
Yeah,
we can play big butts and not worry about removal spells, and then we can play unblockable like Skulk, and then again we don't have to worry about removal spells.
In our top end, we're playing removal spells, and Kozilek's Return is removal spells. So we've already kind of, Elder Deep Fiend is removal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean it's tempo, but
Yeah, it's tempo, but
it's still. I definitely know what you're saying. When you go Elder Deep Fiend, tap down your 4 creatures, I get to hit you for 5 for free, and if you're not just tapping them down, you're wrathing the board for 5. It's quite good.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Okay. So let's talk about. I think we have some room for. We have 3 colors, and we need to hit our land drops. So we're gonna have to play probably some basics. Also, what's the Is it Ruins of Orin? No, it's not. Which is the land that lets you look for another Eldrazi if you cast a big Eldrazi?
That's the one I was going to mention next. It's Sanctum Magugan. You definitely want to play Sanctum Magugan. And then the other land that we want to look at, because we have actually infinite Devoid cards, is Corrupted Crossroads. Now, this land sucks. Don't get me wrong. This land is actual trash water. But it might be perfect in our deck.
Okay. I'll play one.
It's City of Brass, but only works for Devoid cards.
You tap it when you play a colorless creature, and then it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, right?
No. This is Corrupted Crossroads. This is taps for a waste, or you can tap it and pay a life to add a mana of any color, but you can only use that mana to cast a spell with Devoid.
Oh, gotcha.
So, like, it doesn't actually even work for Assault Formation, but it's red and blue and colorless.
Right. Okay. And we do have some other green in there too, I believe, because we have
World Breaker's Devoid. Yeah.
World Breaker, yeah. Were we still thinking about using some of the green evasion stuff?
Green evasion stuff? Can you give us some cards?
The Roar of Challenge. Or even something like a trap spell like Shape the Sands for a quick +0/+5 in conjunction with the Assault Formation. Could be pretty devastating.
So I think what we should start with is like 4 removal spells and then maybe some combat tricks.
I feel like there's a non-basic land that was really just focused on Eldrazi, and it wasn't the one you were talking about. Eldrazi Temple? Is that a thing?
Eldrazi Temple's a thing in Modern.
It's not in it's not in Frontier. I mean, Ruins of Orin Reef is probably okay in this deck because all of our stuff is colorless, but Ruins of Orin Reef also is a terrible land.
Yeah, it comes into play tap,
it's
which
really
is
annoying.
Pretty,
it's really annoying.
Pretty solid, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost worth, like, if we're light on green sources.
Oh, there's also Shrine of Forsaken Gods, perhaps?
That one's okay. I guess that just ramps us. I think the problem is having enough colors to go have red and blue.
Yeah, I'm worried about that. So there's so do we want to lock down what we want those removal spells to be and then talk about combat tricks? Because we're running 4 Kozilek's Return, right? So that's removal there, but we have there's other things we could do. What other removal are you feeling like? It's something like, without black, what do I do for removal without black?
All right, so a card that I've been thinking of for a little while that I know you guys like to brew, so you might be interested in more than other people, is a card called Reality Shift. So this is a blue 2-mana instant from Fate Reforged that says exile target creature. and then they manifest the top card of their library, which makes it a 2/2.
Oh, it's kind of like Turn to Frog or something like that.
Yeah, and it's a 2-mana instant exile target creature, which is incredibly powerful, but it turns it into something that can be Kozilek's returned. So it kind of combos with our other removal spell, like turn your giant fatty into it, turn your Siege Rhino into a 2/2, play Kozilek's return.
Yeah. Well, hey, Daniel's not here. I think this is great. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have the voice of reason here to tell us not
I'm
to.
in.
Colin.
I like it.
Right? The card's pretty good.
I have devils on both my shoulders.
If we don't care about like 2/2s, I love how we keep saying 2/2. It's like my favorite joke. I love how if we turn all of their big creatures into 2 power, 2 toughness creatures, we can just block them all day long.
Right.
Like, chances of us manifesting something that they can actually flip up that's bigger than our O5s is very slim.
Oh, I have another card that we might consider in red. How about, and it's not hard removal, so, feel free to tell me I'm an idiot. But Savage Alliance could be something useful too. We could do as much as 3 damage to a single creature, and as well as giving one of our own big baddies trample. So Savage Alliance is 2 and a red with escalate 1. Creatures target player controls gain trample until end of turn, or Savage Alliance deals 2 damage to target creature, or Savage Alliance deals 1 damage to each creature target opponent controls.
That's actually a really good card that is not seeing infinity play. My actual issue with it is it just worse Kozilek's return? Like, is it sort of the same slot that takes up, and then we would have like 5 plus 3 mana removal spells?
The only reason that I like it is because it has the potential to give all of our creatures trample, which could be useful if we do have an assault formation in play.
Exactly, and I really do actually like it for that. So that's the one that's interesting. So maybe it's 3 Kozilek's return, 1 Savage Alliance, or 3/2, something like that.
Well, okay. So here's the thing. I would like to make a counter proposal to Savage Alliance before we decide. My counter proposal is Destructive Tampering, which is also 2 and a red. For it's a sorcery, you can choose one. You can destroy target artifact. So there's a lot of artifacts that we probably want off the game. So if we don't use it for its other ability, destroying target artifact is pretty good. And then the other one is creatures without flying can't block this turn, which would be potentially a finishing move if we're not playing against like a Jeskai Flyers deck or something like that. Obviously, both of these cards, Savage Alliance and Destructive Tampering, would probably be either boarded in or boarded out kind of things.
Yeah, I feel like Destructive Tampering could be absolutely devastating, but I also feel like it could sit in your hand taking up space. It feels like a sideboard card to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we'll steer back onto the road and stick with 4 Kozilek's returns right now, because that's actually the best version of the card we're talking about. Right? It sweeps creatures, and then it sweeps all the creatures.
And you don't think we need more than 4?
Yep.
Yeah, well, not at the cost of playing something just worse.
Also, you can't play any more than 4 cards.
Well, no, but we have Radiant Flames, so we can
that.
play more than 4 sweepers.
I know, it was a joke.
That was hilarious. Good job.
Haha.
I missed it entirely.
Ha.
I was just confused.
Yeah.
Well, you said, should we play more than 4 Kozilek's returns? And I said, no, you can't do that.
Oh, okay. Well, now that you've explained it, it's really funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
The explanation made me laugh harder.
Womp womp.
Okay. So, gentlemen, we are in a position where we have, I think, all the pieces we need. We just have too many cards right now, so we can talk about numbers a little bit. So, and I think I probably put in too many dirty artifacts in our first. I have 5, 3 Ghostfire Blades and 2 Skeleton Keys. So with an average CMC of 2.76, we really should be running 25 lands in order to make sure that we hit them, and especially with 3 colors. So
that's too many lands.
Okay.
Like our average CMC is under 3, but what's our greatest CMC is
8.
Yeah, but that's not true.
Yeah, it's not even a real 8.
Right? It's like
I
really
think
like
that
a
you're
5.
letting the
Like I think 24 24 is as many as we want to play. It would be nice if we could play 23.
Okay, 24.
Music to my ears. Tony, you should come back more often.
Yeah, right?
Because Colin loves to
No.
decks.
It's not over-manaing. It's playing to the
It's
probabilities.
technically appropriate. Yes, like it's technically not even. I don't want to say it's correct, but it's technically sound what you're doing. Yes, in the reality of the situation is we probably don't need
Okay.
that 1 or 2 extra lands, and those are basically like 1 mana light removal spell slots that we can really like benefit from.
Okay, so we have 4 Reality Shift, 4 Kozilek returns. Basically, we are 6 cards over if we run 25 creatures. 4 Assault Formations. So how many?
So the thing that sucks about Assault Formation is it doesn't stack. So is 4 the right number? Because we only ever want to see 1 in a game, right?
So we've run into this issue previously.
I mean, it is the namesake,
And-
so I'm happy to play 4.
Well, but we don't have any way to tutor or
and
draw
that's where
cards.
looting. Do we not have any looting in our deck at the moment? Because looting would
Skeleton Key helps.
Right. What?
skeleton key does help. That's true.
Right. But that's it.
I mean, yeah, but that's it. So that's not like I don't know if that's even correct. And the other thing about Skeleton Key is it might be correct to actually only play 1 and 4 Ghost Fireblades because 2 Skeleton Keys doesn't stack the way that 2 Ghost Fireblades do.
Unless you have, well, that's true in this deck. Unless you have the Assault Formation, it doesn't. So, okay, we'll do that. We'll go down to 1 Skeleton Key and 4 Ghost Fireblades. Or can we still run 3 Ghost Fireblades and call that a cut and make it 4 artifacts?
Oh, we can probably run 3 Ghost Fireblades. It might turn out to be very good, but that we can figure out a little bit later.
Yeah, we can always hold an extra Ghost Fireblade in the sideboard for.
Right.
Oh, we can test it a bit too, and if you're like, man, turn 2 Ghost Fireblade was sweet, then we could play another one.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, and once again, this is a first draft deck, so we don't have to get it perfect. We just have to get something that we feel like will be viable. So, what does 3 Assault Formations feel like?
It feels like not getting it enough. So I'm going to be a bit bullish on that, just because I would rather draw an extra Assault Formation than not draw any Assault Formation, and I say that having experience playing Assault Formation decks in Standard.
I think I agree with this, specifically with Assault Formation, and because of the reason you said. It's better to have 2 because it is that powerful than it is to have a bunch of O5s. Yeah, right. I agree with that in this Assault Formation scenario, yeah.
Yeah, it's not always true in this particular case. I think it definitely stands. The card that I'm looking at that I'm wondering if we actually need 4 of is Elder Deep Fiend.
Honestly, Elder Deep Fiend with Sanctum of Ugin is the best thing you're ever going to do in Magic. You just get to chain one every turn. It's ridiculous. Elder Deep Fiend is like one of the most powerful cards in Standard that doesn't instantly win you the game.
So is 3 good?
You got to think about it too.
Yeah,
Every Elder Deep Fiend is another Kozilek's return too.
Well, yeah, but that's same is true of Worldbreaker and Oblivion Sword.
But Worldbreaker Oblivion Sword doesn't trigger it, and Worldbreaker doesn't have flash. So if we're concerned about vehicles and sorcery speed like manlands and stuff, then we want to have more Elder Deep Fiends. But if we just want to play 3 Elder Deep Fiends because we want to play 2 Worldbreakers and we only want to play 5 big fatties, I think that's a completely reasonable place to start.
Okay. Well, I can go down on Blinding Drone and Herald of Kozilek, put both those at 2. And that'll give us a little bit of room, and I still think that's good.
Yeah, because Herald, we don't really have a way to draw a bunch of cards, so once we play a Herald and we play 2 more spells, we're going to be just top decking anyways, right?
Right, but wouldn't that also it would make the Deep Fiend cheaper? Even it would help.
Yeah, but it doesn't help us draw the Deep Fiend, right? If once we're out of cards, we're just playing off the top of our deck anyways, so it's good for the turn after you play it, but then every turn after that it has diminishing returns and becomes less useful because you have less cards.
So that actually brings up an interesting point. Do we want to play the Blinding Drone over what is the Eldrazi, the 1-drop blue that allows us to draw, should we so desire, Prophet of Distortion? Do we like that better than the Blinding Drone, or do we prefer the tap down ability of the blinding
I
drum.
prefer the blinding drum because Prophet of Distortion dies to Kozilek's return, and we are going to be firing that thing off so much.
Yeah, the other thing, that's actually a very, very good point about Blinding Drone, and Blinding Drone carries Ghost Fireblade very well. Like a 3/5 is nothing to be ashamed of.
I guess I can't really argue with any of those points.
Yeah, I actually really didn't even look at the fact that it dodges K return, but that's really smart.
Yeah, because we're going to be doing that a lot. That's how we're going to keep all the low to the ground. That's how we're going to get rid of all the goblin tokens. Like, it's a big deal. So right now we're only 3 cards over.
Emerging out of a 2-drop, like if you just play a Blinding Drone and then emerge out of it, you still save 1 mana total on the Elder Deep Fiend.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's actually kind of sweet. It's like having your crappy 2-drops that you draw later when you have Elder Deep Fiend is kind of like putting them into like a mana battery for their next turn, right? Like you spend the 3 mana now, and then next turn it gives you +1 mana because you were going to cast the Elder Deep Fiend on your opponent's turn anyways. Which is why I really like 4 Elder Deep Fiends. Like I think the card's actually just one of the best cards, and it goes toe to toe with Gear Hulks. So what actually means is like there's no other creature in the format that just is bigger than it, that isn't ridiculously bigger than it. Like a mono green Gear Hulk with all of the counters on itself, yes, that makes sense. That's bigger. But most of the other stuff, like Herald of Anguish and
well, maybe
like all these
maybe
other like crazy flying 5/5s just like don't compare to the 5/6.
Maybe we ought to lose both the other Herald of Kozilek's then. I mean, I understand why they're good, but I'm struggling to find other things to cut.
Well, but see, if Herald of Kozilek does make things cheaper a little bit for a couple times, which maybe means that on turn 4 you can play 2 or 3 creatures. You can play an Assault Formation and something else, or that kind of thing. But also, it's a 3 casting cost creature for Elder Deep Fiends. So it
actually also reduces by 1 too.
Right. So it makes Elder Deep Fiend 2 mana cheaper than using a 2-drop.
So it's only 3 mana.
Right.
Like that's the difference between 3 and 4 mana for casting that like on curve isn't really substantial.
I mean, okay, well hold on. You guys don't have to convince me why Herald of Kozilek is good. You have to convince me why it's better than something else in the deck.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think that it's making things cost less for a turn or 2, and also making Elder Deep Fiend cost 1 additional less is good enough to warrant its spot.
Okay.
Also, the other thing I realized too is if we have 2 of the 0/5 guys that give other creatures you have, your devoid creatures or your colorless creatures plus 0/1, then those creatures survive a flashback Kozilek's return.
That's true. Yeah, they definitely help with that. If you have 2 of them in play,
then they both survive, and our World Breakers and Elder Deep Fiends are already going to survive and just have a massive toughness anyways. Which is sweet because the Vile Aggregate is actually an 0/5. So it would survive if you have one too.
That's great. The party squid's gonna have somebody to party with.
Yeah, somebody's gonna spike the punch for him. I actually like the ability that those is it the Tide Drifters that yeah, and the fact that they're the 2-drop that you can go Tide Drifter into the Vile Aggregate, and then you have 0/6s.
Yeah. And with the Assault Formation, they're just so nasty.
Yeah, they're just
because if you get 2 of them in play, then you're swinging for 6.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great.
Okay, so we can take out the Herald.
Do we want to drop a single Benthic for a Vile Aggregate? Trade up Unblockable for Trample, and an additional potential damage.
That's actually a really good question, because I think that the Unblockable is better with Assault Formation because they just have no choice. And I'd rather see a 6/6 Unblockable than a 7/7 Trample when we factor in Ghost Fireblade.
Yeah, valid.
So I would just rather see Unblockable than Trample if we're only having +1 more power in general.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, ingest plays into Oblivion so very nicely.
That's true, actually. Yep, we didn't even get to that.
I guess Vile Aggregate also has ingest. So there's
we're not losing out on any ingest.
What are we at, Colin? How many cards do we need to cut?
Still at 62.
Do we cut 2 reality shifts and just rely on the Kozilek's returns?
I could definitely see cutting 1 shift, 1 return, and trying 3 and 3. Because reality shift deals with like things that are a problem, like right now, like anything that is a problem, any single creature that they play, it just deals with right away. Where Kozilek's return, you kind of have to like put a bit of work into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean this is something that we can also work on in tuning.
Yeah,
and
this is definitely tuning.
And because
tuning and also sideboarding, depending on the deck we're playing, it could just be obvious. Oh yeah, we're playing 4 Kozilek's returns and we're playing 2 Radiant Flames, or we could run into a deck where like, yeah, we're playing 4 reality shifts and 2 Kozilek's returns. Like, it should be obvious after game 1 how we're gonna play that.
So we'll just keep all of those ones handy. Okay. So we're down to 21 creatures, Tony. How do you feel about that? Is that okay?
So what are the non-creatures then? 4 Assault Formation, 3 Reality Shift, 3
Kozilek's
returns. That's 10.
Then we have the Ghostfire Blades and the Key to the City. Skeleton Key.
10, so that's 15, and then 20. That's probably a good start. Maybe it's like only 2 Ghostfire Blades because we're not actually playing Ensoul Artifact.
Right.
Like maybe we don't want to have like that many, and then we can find room for 2 more creatures that can actually end the game. Actually, that's probably a good place to start.
Ghostfire Blade hits every single creature in the deck.
But if we don't have a creature, then it doesn't do anything.
Right. Okay. So do you want to go down to 2 Ghostfire Blades and bring up the creatures by 2?
I think that's probably correct.
Okay.
Maybe like 1 Blinding Drone, 1 Vile Aggregate.
Yeah.
I like both of those because there are nice early plays.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Like Blinding Drone just can be a removal spell forever once it's no longer effective in the air. Once we're trying to get to Assault Formation, or even once we're trying to get to just Elder Deep Fiend.
Yeah, it can just, if we have that available mana, we can just lock down our opponent's best creature.
How many Blinding Drones are in the list so far?
3 right now.
I think that card is going to be one of the cards that will surprise us at how good it is. Because did you guys go to the pre-release?
For the set? Yes.
Yes. Did you get to play with Pacification Array?
No.
Oh, you're talking about Pacification Array for Aether Revolt. No, we did not get to play with that card, but I do remember playing the Oath of the Gatewatch pre-release and getting locked down by Blinding Drones.
Yes, so it's basically the same thing, only cheaper, and can actually become a 3/3 for us. So that's like really, really strong.
Cool. So
that is a removal in that slot. So I would see if we can get 4 Blinding Drones.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, the card is that good. We get to play that instead of removal.
Do you like it better than Vile Aggregate?
Okay, we'll lose.
Because we're light on removal, I think so.
Do you like it better than Ornithopter?
Probably.
Okay, so maybe we go to 3 Ornithopters to bring it up and leave 2 Vile Aggregates.
That's probably correct, yeah.
Okay, because I really like Blinding Drone. I think it's great.
I think Blinding Drone is sweet, and we definitely have the Pain Lands to play it.
Yeah. Okay.
Like if mana's loose too, like we can always consider Aether Hub. I know it's like a one-shot use, but it actually works.
I don't think we're gonna be I think we're gonna be okay on mana, to be perfectly honest.
This deck is sweet.
I think it's good. Yeah. So let's give it a quick recap. So we're running 24 lands, so that's 4 Botanical Sanctum, 1 Corrupted Crossroads, 1 Forest, 2 Islands, 2 Mountains, 2 Sanctum of Ugins, 4 Sheevan Reef, 4 Spire Bluff Canal, and 4 Yavimaya Coast. And then with creatures, we have 23 of those. We're running 4 Benthic Infiltrators for the unblockables. We have 4 Blinding Drones for sort of soft removal, 4 Elder Deep Fiends for finishing tempo, 1 Oblivion Sower for the extra lands. That'll be fun. 3 Ornithopters just to see if we can get in over the top. 4 Tide Drifters just makes everything better. 2 Vile Aggregates, which could get pretty big potentially. And 1 World Breaker because. Then we're running the hallmark card, which is Assault Formation, so we're running 4 of those. Then for instance, we have 3 Kozilek's Return for sweeper removal and 3 Reality Shift for targeted removal. And then artifacts, we're running 2 Ghostfire Blades for pumping. And Ghostfire Blade, I don't know if we ever read that actually. Ghostfire Blade costs 1, and it's an equipment, and it says equip, creature gets +2/+2, and has an equip of 3. But your equip ability only costs 1 to activate if it targets a colorless creature, which is every single creature. So that's good. So I think that I apologize, we forgot to read that one, and that's important. Skeleton Key is our last artifact, which is also a 1-mana artifact. Equipped creature has Skulk. Whenever creature deals damage to a player, you may draw a card if you do discard a card. And I think 1 of is good for now. If we ever cast it, we'll see how it goes.
I also personally, now that I read Skeleton Key, think Skeleton Key should actually be Key to the City.
You think so?
The Skulk theme is fine, but now that we're not in the Skulk theme, Key to the City lets us draw cards whenever we want.
Oh, actually, that's really nice too. Key to the City is nice just because if you top deck land mid to late game and you don't need it, you can discard it on your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
To
draw cards.
So
that
key,
extra.
and I'll read that one
great.
too. Key to the City is a 2-mana artifact with an ability tap, discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. That's a good way to put a Kozilek's Return in the yard. And then whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. So, okay, I'll swap that out.
Yeah, I played in a standard F&M this past week, and Key to the City cost me a draw, which was annoying.
This will be good.
I wasn't able to defeat my opponent.
This will be good to have for our second assault formations. And honestly, I mean, we could try and tweak this forever now, but we probably want 4 Kozilek's Returns with a Key to the City and 2 Reality Shift.
That's something we can. That's something we can play around with, and that's a good point too. The Key to the City definitely mitigates that danger of drawing an additional assault formation. That's the loot that we were talking about earlier that we wanted to kind of find a way to put into the deck. Another thing that's important about this deck is it's really not that expensive. It's only about $100 for this deck, which is great because that means it's playable. It's not necessarily super overpowered. It's running some like older cards that used to be a little bit more expensive, but people have mostly forgotten about. I mean, Elder Deep Fiends are only like $2.50. Oblivion Swords are only $1.25 right now. World Breakers probably the most expensive Kozilek's Return is the most expensive non-land card, but World Breaker's only $3. Kozilek's Return, which you could easily swap out for the very, 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 very inexpensive Radiant Flames.
Well, Kozilek's Return will rotate in the fall too, right?
Yep, it will.
So this is basically as expensive as it's going to get.
Right. And so the other expensive cards are just the fast lands. Spirebluff Canal is $8 and Botanical Sanctum is $3.50.
And same thing. These are the most as expensive as
the
they're ever going to be.
The lands are the big one.
So the longer you're willing to wait, the cheaper they're going to get for you. Yeah.
I feel pretty good about the price tag on this one. Listeners, I encourage you to go try it out. You might just have some of these cards lying around if you ever did, dig out your Battle for Zendikar. Because you may not have been seeing these particular Eldrazi's. They might be in a box in the back of your closet somewhere. But I think they're pretty much exactly what we want. So I'm really, really excited to test this deck. So Tony, thank you so much for all of your input, and that was extremely helpful. And I'm gonna try to take. I think I actually have most of these pieces. So I think I'm gonna actually take this deck to our local Frontier in Seattle. Meeples in West Seattle runs Frontier every Sunday at 5:30. So if you're in the neighborhood, check that out. I know that we have listeners all over the country, but anybody in Seattle, if you want to check that out, I am going to try and take this deck to that and see how it goes, because it'll be my 3rd time going, each time with a different brew. So it'll be good.
For the first 2 months of playing Frontier, I didn't play the same deck for the 2 tournaments in a row.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I played just a new deck like 3 times a week. I just played a new deck,
and that's so great because it's still a wide open format. There's still definitely directions to be explored, and I'm pretty excited about this deck. So, thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah,
Tony, is there anything you want to plug before we say goodbye?
Yeah, you can check me out on YouTube at AwesomeSauceMTG. You can check me out on Twitter at same thing, AwesomeSauceMTG, and all of my amazing projects going on. So that's Hype Club at manadeprived.com and mtgfrontier.com.
So many projects.
Yeah, so
I don't know how you keep up with
so
it,
many
man.
I know, so many projects.
Impressive.
Also, face-to-face games, Toronto.
Yep. And you are going to GP Vegas, for sure.
Oh, I'm definitely going to GP Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, every hotels booked, flights booked, everything's good to go. I'm just counting the days. I just got more.
Colin, I know you're going to GP Vegas, aren't you?
I will be booking all of my things this weekend. So, yep, I will also be there. So, listeners would love to meet you. Anybody that's there, please come and say hi. And hopefully, I'll get a good video out so you can see what I look like before that.
I'm gonna bring you some Hype Club merch that we have.
Oh, good.
They actually it just showed up today, so I got some really sweet stuff. I'll bring it for you.
Cool. And I'll try to have some Mox Team Zirconia stickers or something fun to hand out if listeners come up and say hi. So,
Yo, stickers are the best.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. It's good to see you again, man.
Yeah, cheers.
Or hear from you, or talk to you, or, something of that nature.
Yeah, right. Nice. Be in my presence.
Exactly.
Gracious farewell.
Okay, that's our show for today. Thanks for joining us.
Tell your friends, get excited.
Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, and you can even friend us on tappedout.net, where we post our decks, and also on Twitter.
And please let us know what you think of the comments. We respond, we read, all those things.
And you can find us on Twitter at moxzirconia, or you can email us your deck lists or any questions you have at moxzirconia@gmail.com. And we want to know how your brews work for you when you take them out to events. So please keep us informed.
Yeah, also let us know if one of our conversations inspired you to build a completely different deck all on your own, that, maybe you took the path that we didn't, or you took the other fork when we went red, you went blue. Tell us. Let us know how it's going. Let us know how much better your version is than ours.
And we particularly want to know what you think about our Frontier content. Should we continue to make new Frontier brews and bring Tony back like we did today? Or should we continue to focus more on Standard? The more feedback we have, the better we can tailor our show to what you guys want to hear.
And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you guys right here next week.